Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss religion and the nature of identity politics in India. In this paper, we are going to discuss religion and the Indian experience, religion and various constitutional provisions, the Indian variant of secularism, and religion and identity politics in India. Given the plural character of India's polity, the divisive nature of the country, owing to the partition along religious lines into two sovereign countries, India and Pakistan, the legacy of hostility between the two communities have all contributed to a condition where religion and religious notions have always made their presence felt in the domain of the secular. Therefore, religion and politics have remained inseparable. They have always been intertwined in a complex way. In the political evolution of modern India, religion has been one of the most pervasive elements. In India, religion has governed political cleavages, competition for power, and coalition building process since independence. According to Romila Thapar, the relationship between religion and politics had complex dimension in the past and cannot be explained away by a simple monocausal explanation that reduces everything to a minimalist religious motivation. Religion is a private matter as long as it remains within the thoughts of a person. When these thoughts are expressed publicly and inspire public actions, such as building monuments for worship and organizing fellow believers into carrying out political and social functions, then religion ceases to be an exclusively personal matter. It is no longer a matter of faith, since its formulation as an organization of believers has a bearing on the functioning of the society. Its religious identity incorporates these functions that are expressed through its institutions such as monasteries, mutts, temples, mosques, churches, synagogues, gurdwaras. Their role has to be assessed not merely in terms of the religion with which they are associated, but also in the context of their functioning as an institution of the society. The constitutional framework reveals the structures of relationship between religion and politics in India, and how the democratic and liberal concerns for equal treatment and liberty for all has been pursued, along with a deep commitment for recognizing and protecting religious and cultural diversity. Experiences of the working of Indian democracy over the last 7 decades reveals that competitive electoral process compels parties to woo people from different communities. Even when a religious community has an organized political party that claims to speak on its behalf, not all sections of the community align themselves with that particular party. Other cleavages of identity, such as caste, divide religious communities as well. The spaces opened by democratic politics and the undercurrent it creates needs therefore to be factored into any discussion of religion and politics. Religious identities remain the formation of social life and individual experience. Yet, democratic politics brings out new confrontations and alignments in which neat boundaries of religious differences are occasionally blurred or overwritten by other identities, which surface time to time as a basis for articulating demands for access to opportunities and development possibilities. By attending to these group articulations, understanding of both the existing fractures within communities and the complex ways in which religion gains centrality or its sidestepped in the pursuit of other conditions for achievement of better standard of living needs to be understood. The Indian experience also reveals that religion has both moral and social dimensions, and that the two are not always compatible with each other or coincide. Religious groups are inherently heterogeneous in their ideological and spiritual moorings, as well as their social and political outlook. They are continually being constructed in response to both the external environment and the internal pressures. Now, let us begin with the Indian experience of religion and how it has over the years dealt with it. India is among the few countries that do not have a recognized official religion. Unlike many other nations in South Asia, India is a democratic and secular republic. Yet, while proclaiming itself to be a secular polity, religion has a presence in the country's public and political life. Religion, in other words, is not conceived as a private matter that can be eclipsed in the public arena. Religious groups and communities are recognized by the Constitution. Religious diversity is acknowledged and protected through a framework of enabling provisions. Secondly, the Indian experience shows that the moral and social dimension of religion do not always overlap. Religious groups are internally heterogeneous in their ideological and spiritual beliefs, and also their social and political attitudes. They are continuously being created in response to the pressures of the environment. Even more importantly, while religious identity may be important to individuals, other identities also structure individual lives and social interactions. In the case of India, caste is another important axis of identity. It is only when these two identities are placed alongside each other that the contemporary Indian reality can be understood. Practically, when considering questions of development in terms of social exclusion and relegation, India is in many respects quite distinct from other post-colonial countries. Unlike many of her neighbors in South Asia, with whom she shares not just her physical boundaries, but also history and culture. Independent India self-consciously pursued the ideals of liberal democracy. India's constitution endorsed not just the principles of formal and legal equality, universal adult franchise, and an elected represented form of government, but also the ideals of secularism. The term secularism was not initially used in the Constitution, but was added subsequently to the preamble by the 42nd Amendment Act. Nevertheless, the principle of secularism was embedded in the Constitution's design. Indeed, the Supreme Court declared secularism as an integral part of the Constitution's basic structure. In the Keshavananda versus the State of Kerala case in 1973. Therefore, the question that needs to be addressed is that how the Indian state has dealt with the implications of recognizing religion and religious diversity in a secular country, and what were its implications. Now we come to the experience of India's experience of religion and the various constitutional provisions that has been put in place in order to protect the various communities. Different religious communities played its part in India's freedom struggle and played an active role in the public and political sphere after independence. However, the various religious communities and their distinct identities were also recognized by the British colonial rule, which gave separate electoral representation to identified groups and communities. Consequently, when the declaration for framing the Constitution of Independent India began, special care was taken to ensure that members from different religious communities were included, particularly in discussion in the rights of citizens. As a result, although the notion of secularism was incorporated in the Constitution, it received a different and unique interpretation. In an attempt to the promotion of religious diversity, the Constitution recognized the presence of many different religious communities with their own distinct moral and social codes and ways of life, and protected the religious liberties of all communities. The idea of secularism was incorporated in the Constitution as a commitment to the ideal of religious non-discrimination, the belief that no one should be discriminated against on account of their religious identity. The Indian Constitution gave each individual and by extension to each community the right to profess, propagate and practice their religion. Article 25. While most liberal societies gave citizens freedom of consciousness and the right to religious worship, in India they have the right to perform and observe religious practices. As most of these societies are collective in nature and are performed outdoors, they place religion in public arena, and the state at least implicitly expected to make the necessary arrangements to ensure that these practices can be performed without interference. The desire to reconcile the concerns of diversity with those of equality prompted the state to advocate the practice of limited intervention in the affairs of the religious communities. The Constitution recognized that religion is a fundamental element of individual identity and hence needs to be protected. The Constitution recognized religious differences and diversity, and therefore it believed that religion should not sanction inequalities and people with strong religious commitment should not be disadvantaged in public and political life. As such, they must be treated like all other groups in the society and given an opportunity to mobilize and express themselves in the political domain. It was with this understanding that the Constitution accommodated diversity and accorded special consideration to minority religious communities. In order to accommodate religious assortments, religious symbols and markers of religious identity were accepted. The Sikhs, for instance, are permitted to carry a kirpan, and different other communities can wear their specific headgears or other elements of their dress code in all public spaces, the workplace, civilian or military, private or public. Religious practices were also permitted. These include the rendering of namaz or other kinds of collective prayers in public areas, street procession, and the use of public property and land for religious functions. Even more importantly, the state recognized the presence of plural and diverse personal laws, as well as religious institutions, involved in the assertion and the clarification of these codes. Another important constitutional provision aimed to ensure religious liberty was that communities are permitted to set up their own educational institutions. Article 30 gave all minorities, religious or linguistic, the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. While state-run educational institutions were explicitly prohibited from imparting religious education, educational institutions established and managed by linguistic and religious communities are permitted to impart religious education. They are also eligible to receive financial and other support from the state. The intention behind Article 30 was primarily assurance to minority communities that their identity and distinctiveness would be preserved and protected, and that they would not be compelled to assimilate into the dominant mainstream. Even if the culture of the majority dominated the state-run educational institutions, minorities have been able to impart their religion, linguistic and cultural legacy to their children in minority institutions administered by specific communities. In addition, Article 26 gave all communities the right to establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purposes. There are a range of such institutions engaged in the maintenance of religious places of worship and the maintenance of related property, and others engaged in social and welfare activities. Several sects such as Arya Samaj, the Ramakrishna Mission, the Society of Jesus, and trust like Shiromani Gurdwara that are administered by recognized religious bodies provide education, healthcare, and other social services to different communities. Now we come to our understanding of the Indian variant of secularism. The Indian constitutional framework does not advocate complete separation of religion from politics, nor the banishment of religion in the private space of life. Although India has no official state religion, the understanding of secularism that is embodied in the Constitution implies an impartiality of the state and its dealings with citizens professing different faiths or religions. This has led several scholars to argue that the framework of secularism that has been imposed upon the social fabric of Indian society does not fit well because India is a deeply religious country. A few claim that the political structure of secularism is irrelevant and out of place in societies like India, where religion are totalizing in nature. The primary attributes of secularism, that the state must have no religion of its own and must not support any one religion or religious community, remains and is adhered to in India. That is what makes the state neutral towards, or at least equidistant from, all communities of faith. The Indian experience of the partition and the division of the country on religious lines also gave rise to the intense debate about the would-be character of the new nation state. Many supported the rise of Hindu nationalism and Hindu national consciousness, but another, more inclusive nationalism, which emphasized the composite character of Indian society, was developing alongside after independence. The Indian political elites recognized the need for the creation of a more inclusive form of nationalism, accommodating the diverse religious communities in its fold. The Indian Constitution, therefore, reflects a national consciousness about the vision of a secular Indian polity which emerged during the national struggle. As Bataille pointed out, the social and political turmoil in the country does not make the case for secularism weaker, it makes it stronger. The need for secularism is not because it will eliminate religious passions from human affairs, but that it may to some extent neutralize and soften its expression in public life. However ardently one may desire the separation of religion and politics, it is impossible in a democracy to prevent political leaders from exploiting religious sentiments or religious leaders from seeking political alliances. The framers of Indian Constitution were therefore concerned that people of all religious communities must be treated equally. They must enjoy equal religious and other liberties. Minorities were to have safeguards to ensure that their distinct identities would be acknowledged and protected without being compelled to assimilate within the apparent majority community. Now we come to a discussion of religion and identity politics in India. India is a multi-religious, multi-ethnic society. The Hindus constitute about 82% of the total population, Muslim approximately 13%, and all other religions form a small fraction of the whole. Therefore, religion has a pronounced presence in the social and political life of the state. While religion and its concerns of various religious communities are common in political discourse, it would be flawed to assume that all political parties are merely identity-based parties. This is because competitive politics has compelled all parties, even those strongly aligned with a religious community or certain caste conglomerates, to woo other groups and communities in order to get a simple majority in the legislative bodies. For example, Uttar Pradesh Assembly election 2007, when the BSP, which emerged as a party of the Dalits, wooed the Brahmins, the group that has historically been their oppressor. Concerns of religious communities are thus taken and articulated not just by secular political parties, but also by identity-based political parties. There are therefore many channels through which the interest and demands of religious communities and their members have been represented in the political process, and many parties have over the years supported the religious and cultural demands of specific communities. What distinguishes the so-called secular parties and the religious political parties is that the former consciously seek to forge a collision of interest. They appeal to the wider social base that cut across communities of caste, religion, and language. Identity-based parties appeal to and privileges the concerns of the group they seek to represent, while democratic politics compels them to reach out to other communities. Their core social base, which they try to nurture, is narrower. However, the presence of religion and religious parties compel the secular parties to take a position on religious issues. The result is that seemingly secular parties try to edge out a religious party by raising religious issues and at times supporting more extreme or radical religious agendas in the region concerned. The recognition of religious diversity, formation of regional political parties, and the presence of a range of other organizations, however, has not just been able to provide security to all communities and sections of the population. Independent India has been sporadically rocked by intense inter-community clashes and conflicts. The most visible and virulent form of such conflict is communal violence, in which members of a particular community are systematically targeted and killed. This is because not all religious identities get equally represented by the political parties, which often breed discontent among various regional religious communities. Therefore, in conclusion, it can be said that it is a paradox of Indian democracy that even after decades of independence and the pursuit of development concerns, religious identities continue to assert itself in the political sphere and has further re-entrenched ascribed social identities. At times, these identities have been converted into permanent assets that individuals and groups hold on to and use to access resources in a situation dominated by scarcity and competition. The relationship between religion, concerns of development, and governance are complex. Religion may be a moral influence in individual lives, but the presence of religion in the political arena has contradictory effects. Often it is used instrumentally by all political parties, including religious political parties, to promote their interest in competitive politics. While religious values and beliefs may influence politics, the resulting ideology often appears to be malleable in the interest of the political gain. With this, we come to the end of our discussion. Thank you.